Hello, Americans. I'm Hannah Pack. All around the nation, students have been taught about Shakespeare's greatest works for years. They have been taught that he was a brilliant poet and playwright who wrote original and creative texts. But do you know the rest of the story? William Shakespeare was born in the small town of Stratford-upon-Avon and was raised with very humble beginnings. He may not have been extremely educated or well cultured, however, he was a skillful actor and writer, or so people thought. Shakespeare is thought of as an amazing playwright who was and still is one of the best writers of the English language. However, there is evidence that supports that he stole ideas from previous tales and used them for his own stories, aka plagiarism. Yes, there is evidence supporting that our dear William plagiarized those sensational tragedies he composed. As many of us have been taught, Romeo and Juliet is a brilliant story of feuding families and forbidden love that was created and written by William Shakespeare, right? What if I told you that this quote-unquote original story was actually written multiple times before Shakespeare was ever thought about? The first man to write this story was Mizucho Salernitano. His story shares many themes with Shakespeare's, however, they aren't exact. After Salernitano came Matteo Bendejo, whose story closely matches the Bard's. There are many specific themes shared between the two tales, such as the well-known last names of Montague and Capulet, the costume ball where Romeo and Juliet meet, and the moment in which Juliet kills herself with her lover's dagger, rather than wasting away, as in previous accounts of the tragedy. Neither of these stories is believed to have ended up on Shakespeare's desk, but Pierre Boustou's version, which is believed to have closely followed Bendejo's version of the tragic love story, is accepted as the piece of work the Bard read and adapted into the wonderful story we've all learnt so much about. Along with Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet is believed to have been plagiarized as well. The story of Amleth, in a general sense, is very similar to Hamlet. However, when compared, William's version is much more complex than the earlier Dutch rendition. In both stories, the main character's uncle murders Hamlet or Amleth's father and marries their brother's wife. The main characters claim to be unaware of their uncle's crime, whilst scolding their mothers for marrying their father's brother, and trying to make them change their ways. Among these similarities, both Hamlet and Amleth avenge their father's death. Although there are similarities, Shakespeare's narrative still reigns supreme. Due to this data, people have concluded that yes, he wrote his own story, although he did steal main ideas from previous adaptations of his successful narratives. In conjunction with plagiarism, a more controversial view of Shakespeare is that he is not the author of most of his sonnets. Samuel Mosheim Schmucker is the man who indirectly started this conspiracy. He was trying to refute doubts about the existence of Christ and said it was like questioning Shakespeare's existence. This was meant to be an irrefutable fact, but people took it as truth and ran with it. Although Schmucker may have triggered this argument, Thomas Looney is considered to have been the first to champion Edward de Vere as the actual author of the Shakespearean sonnets. The authorship of Shakespeare's plays has been questioned due to his humble beginnings. Those who reject Shakespeare's authorship cannot believe that someone with such little education and culture could write such amazing things about places he had never been and things he had never done. Edward de Vere, the 17th Earl of Oxford, is considered to be the true author because the sonnets do not sound like a successful young playwright. They sound like an aging man whose life has been ruined. Edward de Vere's life matches this description very well. In the sonnets, the author describes himself as lame, which would have been a handicap for an actor, old, poor, and despised. He also notes that, quote, he hopes that his name will be, quote, buried where his body is, end quote, and that he will be, quote, forgotten, end quote. De Vere was sick, old, believed to be bisexual, which would contribute to a damaged reputation, and has described himself as lame in one of his letters. Additionally, Edward practiced law and traveled, both of which arise in the sonnets. Therefore, because his life shares numerous coincidences that match the sonnets, people have come to believe that the Earl of Oxford is the true author. People have viewed Shakespeare as the most brilliant writer in the English language. But now, you know the rest of the story.